Hi, my name is Jesse at Trash Panda, and out of over 11,000 discs that we've received through our disc recycling program, these on my mic, these are the 37 weirdest. To help us navigate through 37 different discs, I've split them into 5 separate categories, starting with the straight up weirdest, starter sets made by someone who is definitely not a disc golfer, discs I can guarantee that you've never heard of, well-known manufacturers, not so well-known discs, and my top 3. Let's dive right in. And we're gonna start hot right out the gate with a disc that honestly I had no idea what it was when it first came in, but upon closer inspection, I realized that it's an overmolded disc that hasn't been overmolded. So at this point, it's just the center core. Unfortunately, there's no marking to know exactly where this disc came from, but what's super cool to see is that along this bottom edge, you can see there's a little bit of a lip. So when the plastic gets overmolded on the outside, it actually fills in this lip and thus holds its place. Honestly, this disc made me realize that I wish one of the companies that's doing overmolding would show us a little more of what it's like behind the scenes. This disc in particular was awesome to receive. Next up, coming in from Quest AT, we have the Raging Inferno DT, which means it has a dimple track along the bottom. Now, similar to many of the discs that come in the recycling program, you can see that it looks like it went through like a lawnmower or something. But regardless of those gashes, it's super cool to see a disc from Quest, a company who, if you don't already know, was incredibly innovative, and we're gonna make a video about them soon. Moving on, we've got the Landmine from Doomsday Discs, which, if you don't already know, is a lid style disc, and it offers a diameter that's actually a little wider than your typical disc. And while it might feel funky at first, once you've held it a few times, it actually is surprisingly comfortable, and the flight is quite enjoyable. Speaking of lids, we have the Salient Discs Lockjaw, which offers this really interesting groove texture along the top edge, while also having that typical birdie or polecat lid style feel on the bottom. Actually, when Robbie C first felt this disc, he called it a sexy polecat, so take with that what you will.
Yeah, this is sexy polecat.
Continuing with the interesting groove texture on the top, we have the Lightning Discs #1 Flyer. Lightning was actually one of the big players in the game in the 1980s, I believe. And what's interesting about this is not only do you have this texture on the top, but it's also on the bottom inside of the rim. And we've actually received 2 separate #1 Flyers, as well as this disc that doesn't have any stamp on the top, but I can only assume based on what's on the bottom, and the fact that it also has this groove texture on the inner rim, that it's a #2 Flyer. I did not realize how perfectly ordered these things were, but continuing with the grooves on the top and no markings whatsoever, we have what I believe is a DGA Blowfly. And this is the disc that famously was like curled up like a basketball and you could throw it into the basket, and then the PDGA changed the rules for that this past year. But I'm not 100% positive that it's actually a Blowfly or a clone from somewhere else. And I'm sure most know of the next disc, but it was so fun to receive this in the recycling program, considering it goes for a decent amount of money on eBay, but it's the Arobi Epic, which is very well known for its non-concentric rim thickness. Crazy enough, I've still never thrown this disc, but I'm saving it for an upcoming video. So in the meantime, if you don't know about this disc, go check out Jay Millie's video about it. And along with the Arobi Epic, we also have the Arobi Aero. Now, I really hope that the camera does this justice, but you've got the craziest groove track on the top. It puddles down in a super aggressive way right at the edge. You've got quite an interesting slope on the side with the parting line literally at the bottom, which is very abnormal in discs. And then it also offers a lid style grip on the bottom. And I just have to say that this disc probably for me takes the cake of the weirdest disc. Coming in a very close second, however, is the first starter set among starter sets that were definitely not designed by disc golfers. This is the Park & Sun Sports starter set, and while at first glance might just look like your average starter set, once you flip the discs over, not so much. Literally on every single one of these discs, there are these grooves on the inside rim. And personally, I have absolutely no idea why they'd be there. They're not like crazy uncomfortable, but they don't serve a purpose that makes sense to me. And it's not just the putter, but you have them on the mid-range and the driver. And no, I take it back. It's very uncomfortable. But with most discs, like, I can understand why certain innovations are made, like this one, super funky. However, I get it. It's kind of comfortable. Maybe it helps it fly straight, whatever. Whereas with these, I just have absolutely no idea. Next up, if you have not tried these, we've got the PGA starter set. And let me say that one more time just to be super clear, not PDGA, PGA. We actually highlighted these discs in a video a while back, but suffice it to say they're super hard, slippery, and the driver is probably the most understable disc I've ever thrown in my life. Oh, and we went roller. It's rolling. Moving on, we have the flashlight starter set. This is actually a local set to us because it comes from the company Night Eyes based in Boulder, Colorado. And I don't believe they're making these anymore, but we've received a surprising amount of these discs. And if you want to see them in use, you can actually see Bodanza have to putt with the flashlight putter in one of his more recent videos.
And this feels like it's gonna be miserable to putt with.
And while this may be an unpopular opinion, I'm gonna go ahead and just say it, these actually feel surprisingly good. Because of this contraption on the bottom so that they can light up at night, they don't necessarily fly surprisingly good, but they feel pretty good. And speaking of unpopular, these discs, I honestly didn't even know they existed until they came in the recycling program, and they're not a full starter set because I don't have the putter yet, but I am weirdly stoked to get the putter, and that is Franklin Premium Discs. Now, many disc golfers know of Franklin discs, but I have never once seen Franklin in premium plastic, and they don't feel horrible. So if you have the premium version of a Franklin putter, I know a guy. These discs represent probably my favorite category outside of, I guess, the last category, because technically those are my favorites. But these are discs I can almost guarantee that you've never heard of. And if you're walking into this confidently saying, no, I've definitely heard of some of these discs, let me know in the comments once we're done, out of 12, how many had you heard of? Genuinely, before we received these discs, I think I'd heard of 0 out of 12. Case in point, we've got the NQV Champion driver, the Disc Eagle mid-range driver, which is not an eagle, the Sportneer Grampus? I think it's Grampus, but TBD. Also from Sportneer, we have the Volador, the Griffin from XCOM, which I'm 99% sure these are the exact same disc. The Crosslap Discs Open Water, which I've genuinely never heard of Crosslap discs, but we've also got the Credo. And what's cool about getting both of them is you can actually see on the bottom of the Credo that there's a little inscription that says made in Germany. Plus the Credo has this super interesting texture that you can almost gives you grip when you're like fan gripping or something. Keeping things in Europe, we've got the UK Disc Golf Duchess.
This is a Duchess or a Duchess.
And also in the UK, we have the Launch Code X. Not gonna lie, this is one of the cooler stamps I've ever seen. Okay, this one's tough. I believe this is the UB Hand Candy. It also could be called the Tasty PR Coal? I think part of the stamp is missing, but I genuinely have no idea what that would say. So if you do, let us know in the comments. But fun fact, this one was made in Mississippi and is from the very first run. Also from the first run, we have the Rip Discs Ballistic, which, as is evidenced by engraving on the bottom, comes from Eugene, Oregon, plus another disc from Rip. Now this is where things get a little interesting because Rip had 3 discs PDGA approved, the Ballistic, and then 2 others that were overmolded. So I honestly have no clue what this disc is. And be honest, let me know, out of the 12 discs, how many of these had you actually heard of? If somehow this hasn't been interesting already, this category is where things get very interesting. Here we have well-known manufacturers, not so well-known discs. Quick interruption because the holidays are almost here, and not only do we have discs and minis literally made from recycled discs from our disc recycling program, but we also have a bunch of other stuff and a full holiday gift guide on our website. So whether you're shopping for that disc golfer in your life or yourself, no shame here, check out the link in the description and consider shopping both small and sustainable this holiday season. Right off the bat, we have the Innova Puma. The Puma is an older disc from Innova's lineup, and I think that's what's super interesting about this disc because they refer to it as a long-range driver, and right away, this disc shows how much our sport has changed. Get this, based on this little step on the top, as well as the rim thickness, this disc feels exactly like a pig. Yet somehow it's called a long-range driver. And that's simply because the aerodynamics in our sport over the past 40 years have evolved a ton. Next up, for the gyro fans out there, many don't know that at one point Latitude had a line of overmolded discs. And I would honestly love to know if Latitude plans on more of these in the future or what their plans are with gyro. So you may or may not have heard of this company, but next up we have the Daredevil Discs Yeti. And this is a massive distance driver. The rim thickness is crazy wide. But what I find to be the most interesting, this driver on the outer edge has a bead. Back to Innova, we have the Innova Dragon. Now this disc is actually pretty well known because it floats in water. But one misconception about that is because of the weight of the disc. Many think that because it's super lightweight, that's why it floats. But whether or not something floats in water is actually based on the density of the plastic. And with density or specific gravity, if you have something that's 1, that is the density or specific gravity of water. So if something has a specific gravity that's under 1, it'll float in water. And if something has a specific gravity over 1, it'll sink in water. So it's not about the weight, but rather the specific gravity. However, because the specific gravity is typically very low for something that floats in water, that also results in pretty light weights. On the literal opposite end of the weight spectrum, we have the Gateway Ninja, which is PDGA illegal because the rim is too wide, which often also leads to heavier weights. That's about all I'll say in this video because I made an entirely separate video about this disc and actually threw it over 500 feet, which is crazy. An interesting thing though that I didn't talk about in that video is Gateway eventually retooled the Ninja to make it PDGA legal. And immediately following us posting this video, we received, I'm not joking, like a day later, the legal version of the Gateway Ninja. I told you it was gonna be interesting. Another disc I had no idea existed until we received it is the Discmania Sea Serpent, which literally has an LED light on the bottom, just like the Night Eyes starter set that we previously showed. And I think it's out of battery, but yeah. Crazy. Last up in this category, we're back to Gateway with the Diablo DT. And if you remember DT from the Quest disc we talked about earlier, then good on you because this is another disc with dimples on the bottom. And whether you think that dimple technology works or doesn't, these discs are just flat out fun. Actually, I'm just now realizing that this is also a first run Diablo DT. So that's kind of cool. Last up, we have my top 3, and if you've been counting at all this whole time, we're way past 37, and additionally, there's 5 discs in this category, but they're kind of chunked into 3 separates. First up, we have 2 discs from Paradigm Disc Golf. We've got the Tiger and an unknown prototype. I actually made a video about both these discs previously, and to date, not only is it one of my favorite videos, but these are 2 of my favorite discs we've ever gotten. Next up, we have the PDGA official disc in like, I don't know, it was 2010 or something, and it's the 1/4 K from Discwing. Basically, all you need to know about this disc is it's the original rounded rim driver, meaning that it offers a very gradual rounding on the underside of the rim, which some people like, some people don't like.
I'll say rounded rim is probably the stupidest idea we've ever had.
And we've actually received 2 different 1/4 Ks, but considering that they're both called 1/4 K2, I'm left wondering, was there a 1/4 K1? And I know it's all been leading up to this moment, this final disc, and I have to say, I have never seen a crazier disc than this. We actually received this disc from a retailer because that retailer had received it from a recycling company and that recycling company had received it from an unknown manufacturer. So let's say all of that in reverse. Basically, someone made a disc, they sent it to a recycling company to recycle. Said recycling company didn't know how to recycle it, sent it to a retailer, and the retailer sent it to us. And outside of a simple note from the manufacturer talking about the plastic type, there is nothing on this disc to tell us where it came from or what it is. But look at this. It has these holes on the rim. We have no idea what those are for. They're definitely way too deep for the disc to just be sold as is, which makes me believe that maybe it was a quasi overmolding technology where the manufacturer was going to inject a much denser material in the rim. What's really interesting is if you take it a step further, because the recessions don't hit this outer edge, I'm wondering if potentially they were going to fill in a different type of material, like something even denser than plastic. But who knows? For now, it is a complete mystery. Since you stuck around this long, I've got a bonus disc for you. You might be thinking, as a manufacturer, have we ever received one of our discs? As of recently, I can officially say yes. Special shout out to one Noah Tree, or rather Noah Tree's dog, who looks like it got a hold of his inner core. These are the 37 weirdest. Damn it.